like there's been some awareness and at least some excitement. But it's been good to see American patriotism.
I was going to say, I think it's been something for America to rally around. So that has been very cool. So I'm sad that the U.S. is out. I told my son last night, I'm like, oh, well, now we like root for Norway and Spain, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't know. I don't think I can do it. He's 7. He hasn't gotten over it yet.
The Norwegians look amazing.
Because they have fun,
yes,
too. That's why I like to, yeah.
By the way, I looked that up. I thought that may be something that existed for like, decades. It's a brand new, like, the chant, the rowing thing. Started out, I think it was a couple of months ago during the qualification, or maybe last year during the qualification, it became a social media thing. But now it's sort of the culture. And it feels, what is it? The UK and Norway are playing this weekend?
I don't even know.
I think that's the case down in Miami. And so what's interesting about it is that I'm rooting for Norway.
Yeah, I think it's been super fun. And what a role model. Like, that's what I've liked about it to have my kids watch. That they're like players who are doing something that they love and they're still having fun and not too serious about it and playing at such an elite level.
Did you see Mexico is we talked about this yesterday about just how chaotic things are in Mexico, but did you see all the social media posts where they figured out where the British team, the UK team was living or staying? And a lot of Mexican citizens were out making noise to like 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and lights and trying to get their players off balance. It just feels like, I get it, but look, I'm not saying you should be a sport. I just think that maybe taken a little too far. You haven't seen that in the U.S. We had the Spanish team just staying down the street. By the way, since America's out, I'm now rooting for the Spanish team because they're Team Chattanooga.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they are favored to win of all the teams out there. So we'll see. It is disappointing to see America lose because it did feel like at least we had some momentum, but it really, we got way outplayed.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a tough watch with that happens. We have a great show today. We have Tony Urban. He is the Executive Vice President of Transportation for Cass. Cass celebrates their 120th birthday. They're old. Tony's not old. Tony's young. But Cass has been around a long time. And what's amazing about Cass, for those that may not be familiar with it, it's a bank that it's the back-end system for so much in supply chain. Like ultimately, when we talk about moving freight, that's what so much of our audience does is moves freight, make sure it gets from point A to point B. Cass makes sure that the money goes from point A to point B. Perhaps the more important
That's why we all do it. We're not doing it for fun.
No, we're not doing it for fun. We're getting paid. Speaking of getting paid, let's talk about what the headlines are, because that is obviously a lot going on. Another major fraud story.
We kick things off with a major criminal indictment that exposes the staggering scale of organized freight fraud. Federal prosecutors in New York have unsealed charges against 8 individuals in an alleged international cargo theft conspiracy that targeted commercial freight across the United States. Prosecutors allege the organization stole at least $10 million in cargo between March 2023 and the present, targeting everything from electronics and liquor to meat, fish, eggs, clothing, skincare products, and cryptocurrency mining machines. According to the indictment, members of the group impersonated legitimate carriers and other supply chain companies to obtain transportation contracts, then diverted freight, altered delivery information, and removed cargo tracking devices before unloading and selling the stolen goods. If convicted on the conspiracy charge, each defendant faces a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison. Meanwhile, the industry is responding to this pervasive fraud threat with powerful new technology tools. Ascend TMS has integrated carrier intelligence provider search carriers into its carrier verification and qualification system, giving freight brokers and shippers access to real-time carrier and broker data without additional cost. The integration allows search carriers' continuously updated carrier and broker database to power Ascend TMS built-in CVQ platform, enabling users to verify carriers, evaluate brokers, and identify potential risks without leaving the transportation management system. The company said the collaboration is designed to help transportation providers combat freight fraud, double brokering, identity theft, and unsafe carrier selection while simplifying due diligence. Ascend TMS officials said its cloud-based transportation management software is currently used by more than 69,000 companies in over 20 countries. Finally, over on the rails, a major equipment manufacturer is wrestling with a challenging market environment. railcar maker Greenbrier has reported weaker second quarter earnings as lower railcar deliveries weighed heavily on revenue and profits. Fiscal Q2 2026 earnings for the Lake Oswego. Oregon-based supplier saw earnings per share come in at just 47 cents versus 89 cents in analyst estimates, on revenue of $587.5 million that also fell below Wall Street expectations. Earnings from operations were about $25 million, or 4.3% of revenue, which points to serious margin pressure versus stronger recent quarters. However, despite the soft quarter, management raised the quarterly dividend by 6% to 34 cents, which signals continued confidence in cash generation, and the company updated its full-year guidance to 17,500 to 20,500 units from 15,350 to 16,350 units.
Julie, it feels like every single day we're talking about fraud. Some story, there's two of the three stories today. One of them was about technology. Search Carriers is now embedded in the Ascend TMS, which is really long tail, small fleet operators TMS. But, we also had a major crime, I think $10 million this time. But yesterday, I think 2 out of the 3 stories were fraud related, if I'm not mistaken, maybe all 3.
Yeah, and they're all different ways that the fraud is infiltrating these organizations, right? So it was embezzlement yesterday. Today, it's $10 million in stolen goods from an international cargo theft ring. They impersonated legitimate carriers.
It's every day. It feels like, and there's never a shortage of topics. I mean, this is, whether we like it or not, since we are the news outlet that covers this stuff, it's becoming par and parcel. It's definitely a major topic. And to talk about that, we have someone who understands this firsthand because their job is to help prevent and help mitigate a lot of the fraud going on. That's really the role that CAS serves in the industry. We have Tony Urban. He's Executive Vice President of CAS Transportation Systems, the information systems. Tony, first of all, 120 years. How did you guys, you're an old, I was going to say you're an old man, but you're not. The business is
No, let's be honest. You invited the OG. I'll be 60 this year. I've been with CAS for 25 years, OG, and we've been in freight bill processing for 70 years. So it's like OG times, 3. And it's interesting, the origin was, as I understand it, there was a Cass Avenue Bank and Trust had a location surrounded by trucking terminals in a regulated environment. And so they developed a solution where carriers could show up with stacks of freight bills. We'd treat them basically like deposit. The shipper would have an account as well. And so we'd credit the carrier, debit the shipper, and that's the original origin.
And in a regulated environment, it's somewhat easier because the tariff is filed with the government. In a non-regulated environment, your role perhaps is more important because you're auditing freight bills to make sure that there is no, irregularities, and making sure that the carrier, I imagine, and I'd like to ask you this, is out of the error rate, how much is nefarious versus just a general error in terms of billing?
I think it's like combination of things, errors, and then just a desire to get paid.
Yeah.
Right. And so that could lead to multiple invoices, right? And that we check against. The error at the invoice level is relatively small. We do see fraud when it comes to the payment side. And that's where we have a lot of guardrails and checks. And that's where the bad actors are trying to interrupt that. And that's what's really key. And when people outsource it as an integrated solution, that's where we can really help prevent that. And we'll jump to that now. When you think about it, and there's some hesitancy to outsource the payment, right? But we're a bank. And so we make the payments as a part of an integrated solution. And when you think of just value stream analysis, why take a hop out of that value stream and have like an offshore shared services or something handle those payments for you? So you get a great process improvement. The second one you touched on, is security, is when you think of a vendor, it's an endpoint. It's an exposure, right? So if you have to pay 100 to 200 vendors, each one of those is an endpoint that exposes you as a vulnerability. when you send the funds to Cass first, I'm the security layer that you need and that can really help prevent fraud, payment fraud. Then the final one, not fraud related, but very powerful for us is working capital.
So what does being a bank give you guys as an advantage for your customers specifically? Why being a bank is that an advantage versus there's so many of these emerging freight tech companies that have popped up that are trying to handle payments, but being a bank gives you some advantage, is it not?
Absolutely. Advantages, and then maybe from a market perspective, maybe some criticisms. You know, how can the OG, they've been around forever, they're slow in adopting technology. Well, we would say we're disciplined in adopting technology. And yes, we've been around 120 years, but some of our clients have been around longer. Right. And some of those clients that have been around longer or almost as long as us, they're riding the AI, boom. They are helping, with the AI data center build outs and et cetera. So what do they have to do? And the same with us. They have to look at the market. They've changed their product offerings. If you've looked at what they, some very old time names to adopt to AI. And so as a bank, we need to be relevant. We need to adopt new technology, but we need to do it in a disciplined way because we're audited, it seems like every other day. We're publicly traded, so we have public auditors. We're federally regulated, so we have bank regulators in regularly. We invite our clients to come in. So when you're dealing at our scale and when you're dealing with handling billions of dollars, you don't think about it because the transparency as a vendor is so complete. It's an integrated solution. And then that have so much external scrutiny that you don't need to worry about.
Now, I know when I was in payments, I spent 9 years in the payments business. One of the most important things that we would go through when we would do business, we would win these corporate enterprises. Like the staff loved our technology. They really championed us. And we'd get to the CFO. And the CFO, the two questions that he wanted to ask is, what other services can you offer me? That was there. So typically we were going up against big banks. The second is, do I trust the financial viability of this company? That was always where we had a problem. We weren't offering treasury services and other banking services, which was a challenge as a competitor to these big banks. But the one that really knocked us out of so many deals, and we lost tens of millions of dollars in opportunities because big corporate enterprises, the CFO wanted to sign off that this company was going to be around. And it was hard as an early stage technology business. We had better technology, we had better systems, but we could never check that box that we were going to be around, that we were not audited as a bank, we were not a federal, in the audit stream of a federal institution. We lost so many businesses to the banks. Strikes me that you guys have that advantage because you are a bank. When a CFO is doing diligence on its vendors, being a bank does give you an advantage over other payments companies, big frank bill and audit companies.
Yeah, yes, and we love that when because it's a level of overhead that our competitors don't necessarily have. When you think of all the compliance costs to meet all those, either because we're publicly traded or federally regulated, that's just a burden that we invest before we earn $1 of revenue, right? And a lot of people get that, and that just gives them peace of mind. And we can go to the exciting parts of what we do. We reduce friction, right? So we're dealing with carriers. We're not a contingency auditor, right? We just want to improve the process. We want to keep on beating down and reducing exceptions. We provide some of the best data to our clients that you can find on the planet because we condition it, we cleanse it, we normalize it, and then we send it back to them. Then when you combine that with the payment, what's really powerful and what people forget, sometimes we had a situation recently, 10-figure freight volume where they gained about 15 days of working capital. So that's millions of dollars. That they really weren't thinking of. When we first started working with them, they just needed some visibility. They needed some control. And then you roll forward the process, high level of automation, high level of interaction with the carriers impacted, and so much so that they were almost pay as presented. Now they're at, they can now institute terms. And that's just incredibly powerful.
So you guys have been a problem for me because you're offering the two things that I can't offer as a bank. You offer working capital, and because you are borrowing against the Fed window, you guys are a bank that's in the business of lending money. The technology businesses don't do that. That's, these businesses may have fantastic technology, but they're not answering that. One question is, what other things can you do? How do you help my balance sheet? How do you help working capital? And again, this is something that is a problem for every single technology business that's in fintech, is you're not audited the way that you guys suffer the regulators. I mean, when I was at Transcard, we sold to 500 banks. And I saw firsthand how much the regulators and the compliance departments run these banks. They make your life somewhat miserable. You can't say it, I can. I watched it, observed it. But that's their job, is to make sure that the banking system is safe. And if you're a CFO looking at whom are you going to partner with, you guys are checking the box. That working capital element is really important. But perhaps more important is the fact that there are third-party entities, government agencies that are coming in and looking at your business. Even more so, a lot of times as we talk to public traded companies here on the show, and I had the chance to ask Drew Wilkerson, being a CEO of a public logistics company, RXO, does that give him an advantage when companies are looking at business? He said, absolutely, because they can see our financials. They know that we are not lying to the SEC. They know that we're not lying to our auditors. They know and can trust that there is criminal penalties if we don't do the things that we need to do from a finance standpoint. That gives them a lot of financial security. They can watch the business health from afar. You guys are actually in an even greater level of transparency, because not only are you public, but you have the auditors coming in at least once a year looking at transactions and making sure that it's safe, secure, and your bank is going to be around.
Absolutely, and that's something that is a nice guardrail for us, and it does give the right buyer the right sense of security, we appreciate that, and what makes us unique in light of all that scrutiny, right? We're a payments company. Over 90 billion in payments, and a shout out to our sister company that handles facilities invoices. And so as a group, we live in the indirect spend, right? So freight, facilities, expenses, billions of dollars. So from a CFO's perspective, there's two large chunks of spend that can run through that heavily scrutinized, regulated payment stream. And when you put it all together, that's the power, right? So when we're dealing with carriers, the carriers are just dealing with us. You sent me a certain amount of money. And it's a bundle of invoices. I can work on automated cash application. I can help you reduce exceptions and our interests are aligned. Our clients are the carriers, but even in talking with carriers, I can get a bill to an approved state in minutes. I want them to look at that for days and days and days and days, right? And just say, that's working capital you could have. Pick up the phone call, talk to whomever. And so in light of, we try to leverage that regulated, scrutinized entity that we live in and make it to where we can bring the most value to our market. And it also helps, shout out to our CEO, Martin Resch, who I think is one of the most tech-forward CEOs in the banking environment in the United States. And because in one lens, we are a smallish Midwestern bank, dealing primarily in the commercial market, $2.5 billion balance sheet. And then through another lens, we pay over $90 billion a year across 3 products.
Well, you guys have one of the biggest names in freight, particularly if you talk to people on Wall Street. And I think that establishment of being, I'm giving you a hard time about 120 years old, because that is remarkable for any business to be around 120 years. But you've gone through so many different cycles of banking cycles, but also the whole freight market. You guys were around doing freight bill and audit before deregulation, which I think says a lot about your history. But also, you guys publish the Cass Shipping Index and these 3 indexes that come out once a month. We always get asked questions. We're partners with Cass. We always get asked questions about, what does this mean? What is it telling us? But that is, I think, one of the most important things you guys have done for your brand is you're communicating to the public, to Wall Street investors, to the Federal Reserve when they set interest rate policy on what you're seeing in the freight market. It's such an important part of your brand and your story.
Yeah, and more, right? And we're data geeks. I love, I get obviously a more granular insight into our data. I'm not a pontificator, unlike someone else here, right? But I
get the luxury of being wrong occasionally, or a lot, depends on your perspective, because I don't run a public company. I don't have to deal with investors in terms of being a public company has downsides, because you somewhat have to be careful what you say.
Yeah, but we see it, and even when I think it's been around forever, and when you think about the disruptions, I'd go back to like the 70s and the oil embargo, 80s stagflation, 90s .com, 2000s 9/11. Then 08, 09, the financial crisis, and the word that kept on popping in my memory was resilience, right? And then the biggest of the big was COVID, right? Yeah. Literally front row seat watching U.S. manufacturing just kind of fall, except for healthcare, right? And through that all, as a payment-centric but federally regulated financial institution with a heavy investment in technology, we made it through it all. So that's with the right buyers. They look at us and it's like, okay, I know I can outsource this very critical business process and payment function, and then go on to other things.
And Tony, one of the things that I have been to your offices in St. Louis, they don't feel like 120 years old. It's a very modern office. One of the things that was surprising to me, this was not too long ago, maybe 6 months ago, I walked in and you guys were doing an AI hackathon, and you've leaned into AI. So it's not just the establishment and having this long-term tenure. It's also the fact that you guys are using technology to automate processes and leaning into a lot of new solutions.
Absolutely. I mean, the way, AI is key to what we do, but it's not core, right? What we do is very deterministic. What I mean by that is I send in the same outputs over and over millions of times a month. I need the consistent, auditable, transferable, transparent output, right? And so that's determinism. Determinism is intelligence. Determinism is the core of what we do. So we put a position paper out there. We're going to use AI to build deterministic systems. We're going to use AI to help with the edge case exceptions, right? Because what a way AI is awesome at is can provide context. If you have just an unknown situation and it can provide context. And we have one-off scenario, very large one-off scenarios with our shippers that happen. We all know the three parties, CAS, shipper, carrier, we know they're not going to recur, right? So bringing that context, AI can bring some quick context. Hey, this is anomalous. We know it's not going to happen again, because if it is going to recur, I'm going to spin up some more deterministic rules or code and then be on our way. But we're really on the journey, leveraging AI, not as core, but really key to what we do.
I like that. It doesn't have to be sexy. It has to be right.
Absolutely.
So there's been a lot of attention on this segment of the industry lately, with new entrants and certainly a lot of tech talk. Focused primarily on visibility. What do you think, though, is the hard part of this that most of them miss?
I think they know it. I don't, but it's a journey. It's the unstructured data and the multiple data sources, right? We get information from our shippers, we get carriers, we get third parties, and then a lot of that is unstructured, even though we have a high level of automation. And the old boring EDI, 110s through 410s, structured data, I like it because it's machine to machine, right?
Yeah.
And then it's very timely enough, at least timely enough for bill payment. And then with that, though, we marry a lot of unstructured data. And so doing it at scale is where I think a lot of people miss it, because it's very compelling. You could take an invoice package, right? Your invoice, bill of lading, 5 to 100 pages. You can put that straight into an LLM, and it's incredible, the information you can get out of it. But doing that repeatably at scale is where a lot of people miss.
Tony, the other thing I observe with a lot of these startups, and it's interesting because I've invested in probably 30 freight tech companies. I only intended to invest in 1 or 2 that were in payments, but somehow, somewhere along the journey, these early stage freight tech companies discovered payments and wanted to become a payments company. And I'm usually against it. I tell the founders, hey, I spent 10 years in payments. This is a brutal, brutal business. It's very difficult. One of the things I see common is that their risk management processes are not well built out, that they are not managing risk the way that we all know how risky this environment is. And when things are going well, you're fine. But fraud, we've talked about this, is just how pervasive fraud is, but also because of the cyclical nature of it, companies do go under, and companies do, legitimate big companies. There was a big bankruptcy, or I think it was last year. First Brands, Matt took down a lot of the payments companies, and that was a legit deal. How do you manage risk inside of CAS, and how can you help customers manage risk?
Well, that's where I'd be speaking out of turn, but our bank and being regulated, it's capital health, liquidity, all of those are very important, being an important part of a regulated entity. So we have a whole another team at the bank that manages risks like that. And so
that's balance sheet risk for the bank,
yes.
But also on freight bills, fraud is a continuation of just managing it. How do you guys, from a system standpoint, how are you using AI or other systems to sort of catch the bad actors?
Yeah, that's where it's, we adopt the similar stance as cybersecurity. It's not an area of if but when, right? That you're going to get compromised, and it's really that won't disclose all of it, but it's like, it's a multiple layer check of when we get ready to onboard a new carrier for payment, it's multiple layers, different trajectories to make sure we're getting the right information before we execute, because we're 99% plus ACH payment or electronic payment. And so there's a lot of scrutiny before we send that first payment out.
Is the fraud situation, I don't ever know of it being as big as it is, but for you guys, are you catching more fraudulent transactions, or is it because your customers are highly vetted and your onboarding process is mitigating it, that these bad actors are finding different vulnerabilities with different companies?
I'll just say it's regular, right? It's not, I don't know if it's greater because it's been around even back in the check payment days. They were finding our checks in the system, and, they can wash them, they can, but there's so much technology to prevent against that. And then we're so highly automated, from an ACH standpoint, we're not seeing as much, but it's regular, right?
I was in the fleet card business, and we had these convenience checks that you would have at the truck stops. People would know them as the com check. Mm-hmm. We had somebody bought a car, a $44,000, wrote it out on a check. Somehow the car dealer sold it, and it became this big fraud thing. I'm like, first of all, why aren't they checking? Like, you think that the car dealership would check. Maybe, I don't know, but that happens. Anytime you add money, and the problem or opportunity in freight is that we're moving as an industry so much money through it. And these are high dollar transactions. It's where you have an enormous amount of vulnerability. We talked about this yesterday, is just, where do trucking companies see fraud? It's in these frequently processed parts of their business: breakdown, fuel, maintenance. That's where you tend to see the fraud. And in logistics businesses, fraud's taking place across the freight business.
And that can add some tension, especially with the carriers, because we have so many controls, right? And it's for their own benefit, and it's for the benefit of the industry to try to really, it's just another guardrail to try to keep fraud out.
With all this,
Go ahead.
With all this going on, what do you think this space is going to look like in 5 years?
Well, what I see, it's not going to be as autonomous agents running probabilistic processes, right? It's going to be AI-enabled and built systems, but that deterministic layer is going to be key. The second thing, more generally, I'm a big pie guy. Not that I eat big pies, but what my largest competitor, it's people that do things internally. Right. So I think with the advances in technology, and especially with an integrated payment solution like CAS, let's just make the industry bigger. Right. Let's grow it. And then the second thing was, and it's kind of related to Kevin O'Leary, and I'm not going to get into AI and all that, but he relayed the use of AI in an area. Apparently, he's an avid photographer, and he was able to use AI to help him in an area that he couldn't do before. So it's really, what work is not being done today because it's not feasible without AI.
We talk about that all the time, just how much more efficient. Julie had never managed product marketing before. Now she oversees all of our product marketing for Sonar. And it's amazing how much more productive you are And without having, the amount of money we're spending on third-party top-of-funnel sales is de minimis compared to where we were 3 years ago, and it's because of the AI. Having AI, look, you're absolutely skilled,
too, but yeah.
But I think those tool sets make
yeah.
it so much easier. You just talked about how you are redoing our whole campaigns for what we call the long tail, which is Blue to Blue, the Market Monitor, and Quick Rates are products that are typically consumer-centric or are self-service. It's a different sales process that, frankly, as a business, we didn't focus on because the cost of marketing to that audience is quite expensive. But with AI, you can totally do it.
Yeah, there's not an area within our overall solution that's not being impacted. But just back to the tagline, it's key but not core. Core has to be deterministic.
All right, Tony, I got to ask the last question because we could talk about this for the rest of the hour. What's the market look like for you guys? Because everybody wants to know. That's ultimately what it comes down to.
I see in what you're seeing in the others, right? I'm not seeing the demand yet, right? But the supply constraint is driving the rates from what I can tell. Again, as a one step removed from the experts, but I'm seeing what you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I look at your shipping index because it has a lot of LTL in it. And I think that sample size does tell us about, in an industrial recovery and a freight recovery, LTL tends to lag the broader truckload market simply because shippers are consolidating into truckloads. And I think that's exactly what your data has been saying. Fascinating story. We'll be right back. We've got RXO capacity now. When routing guides break, RXO is there to help you. We'll talk about that and give you a read on Sonar and what we're seeing here in the freight market. Stay with us.
Thanks, Ben.
Race car drivers like NASCAR champion Jesse Love are a lot like commercial drivers, pros. But even the best in the world still watch the tape to see what they missed and get better next time. So we created the Samsara driving coach.
Great race, Jesse, but you were following too closely and you were speeding.
Okay, you got me on that one.
Samsara uses insights from millions of professional drivers to coach drivers in real time.
Because even champions need a coach.
Give me the keys.
What's the masterclass all about? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a driver, you're an owner-operator, you're a fleet owner, whether you're in compliance services, dispatcher, no matter what it is, masterclass is for you. Every 2 weeks, you're going to sit down with me, and we're going to go over certain business topics that are related specifically to your small trucking company operations. We're going to help you with everything from compliance to how to negotiate better on the spot board, how to find direct freight, and everything in between. This is the reason why you don't want to miss out on masterclass. It's about an hour to an hour and a half, and then on top of that, you'll have the library to you so that way you can always research and reflect back onto it. Don't miss out this opportunity. This is built specifically for you. I'm excited, and I hope to see you in class.
Imagine a world where your freight moves as fast as a digital pulse. What if your visibility didn't just tell you where a truck was, but exactly where it needed to be 48 hours from now? Think of a logistics network that corrects its own mistakes before they cost you a single dime. What if your supply chain could think for itself? Imagine AI agents negotiating rates in milliseconds, predictive models that solve labor shortages before they even happen. This isn't science fiction, it's the agenda. On July 15th at the historic Old Post Office in Chicago, FreightWaves presents the Supply Chain AI Symposium. We are defining in real time how AI is embedded into every mile, every warehouse, and every handshake. Because in 2026, the future isn't just coming, it's already negotiating. The FreightWaves Supply Chain AI Symposium. Secure your spot now.
Welcome back. Earlier today, Craig dove into the Sonar data. Let's take a look.
trucking market is certainly hot this year. There's no doubt about it. But one of the sectors, one of the modes of traffic that's cooled off slightly has been the flatbed industry. We saw a real strong surge of flatbed activity really starting in February and even got started back in January. And it continued and really peaked in April into May. Right before we entered the month of May, we started to see it drop off a little bit. Volumes are still robust, but for tender rejections got over 50%. We're at 55% in the flatbed tender rejection rate levels, and now we're at 24%. Now, what is going on here? Because the other modes of traffic have gone absolutely the opposite. Refrigerated is doing exceptionally well. It's near cycle highs. Van is near cycle highs. Why is flatbed cooled off a bit? Well, first of all, when you're at 50% rejection rates, this is not sustainable. At some point, the market is going to correct. The second thing is flatbed moves a lot of seasonal goods and moves a lot of stuff involved in production of build out of data centers. These are big projects, as well as stuff related to defense and military and defense production. And all of those things were really the story for the first couple of months of the year, as we saw this AI CapEx go in to build out new massive data centers, as well as what was going on in Iran was driving some of the movement of materials across the country in related to the Department of War and their need for munitions and missiles and all sorts of stuff as they move things across the country. They do use civilian contractors. They do use private for-hire trucking companies to move their freight to handle the logistics of the Department of War. The Department of War is the most successful and most proficient logistics operators in the entire world. That is the backbone of the U.S. military. And part of that is our private contractors that are supplying services to the Department of War. Now, one of the things that we have seen is that the rejection rates, now spot rates are still near all-time highs. We're at $4.30 a mile. That has cooled off a bit. Rejection rates have cooled off as well. One of the reasons for that is likely to do with the fact that you get into the seasonality factor. When you're building out a major AI data center or any type of huge construction project, you're going to prepare those materials very early in the year, because construction, the seasonality in construction, anyone who's ever built a home would know this, tends to peak in the really warm months of the summer. That's when labor is willing to work outside. The weather is fairly good. You don't have a lot of winter storm issues like you have in certain parts of the country. You also don't have a lot of freezing weather that causes problems at construction sites. Concrete will, certain times of the year in certain climates, concrete has a problem of actually curing if it's too cold. If it's wet, it doesn't work. So really, a lot of construction projects are really fine-tuned for the spring to that period from the spring to the fall. And therefore, when you're building up these big projects, they're moving a lot of that product in advance of production. So it's moving into the supply chain, it's moving to the production site, and it's being currently built out and currently constructed. And so that's largely a big driver of that. And what we saw was just huge demand for flatbeds. It was outstripping supply, and that has cooled off. We're still at 25% rejection rates. Again, that is near an all-time high, but we're not at 50% what we were earlier this year, but it's still a very inflated market. The spot rates in flatbed is $4.30. Now, one of the other drivers of the Department of Defense, or Department of War, I should say, and their use of munitions in the Iran conflict and the replenishment of weapons that are on order. Donald Trump is visiting with NATO. NATO's meeting is taking place today in Turkey, and there's a big conversation about new munitions orders that we can expect come out of those meetings. And so you'll expect new weapons, new aircraft, new missiles, all the stuff that's going to go into shoring up Europe is going to drive a lot of capital expenditures from governments all over the world. It's not just the United States. Europe has been on notice that they need to ramp up spending in defense to really do their part. And certain countries have done it, like Poland has exceeded that number. Other countries are lagging and have a lot of work to do to catch up to really maintain their commitments. And we should expect some big announcements. We've already gotten a couple of those, but should expect more announcements coming related to this. And one of the things we're watching is the defense bill. The defense bill that's really being teased right now is $1.5 trillion, an astounding number in terms of total defense spending. Right now, it's about $1 trillion. Next year, it's proposed to go to $1.5 trillion, which would be a 50% increase. The interesting thing about the 50% is that 85% of that increase is actually in what they call procurement, which is basically buying weapons and buying things that the military needs. It's not for paying our troops more, although the troops will get a 7% pay increase. It is about providing more weapons and more munitions and more armament for the U.S. military. And again, the nice thing about that from a freight perspective is that stuff gets moved around the country. It gets moved to supply our military with the kinds of weapons and missiles and munitions that they need. And so that procurement number is the number that we in freight should be paying attention to, because that's really what matters. The good news about this is that the majority of the freight, if you're in flatbed, a lot of that freight will end up on flatbeds. And we have the research report we call a SITREP, where we outline exactly how this works. And so we've taken the proposed defense bill, again, has not been passed through the House or Senate, so it's got some work to do. There'll be some changes, modifications. But one thing you can expect is that the U.S. Congress and the president want more defense spending. And so that's likely to be passed, because the way the military industrial complex works is members of Congress will support a defense bill if there are jobs in their backyard. And the way that a military industrial complex works is they locate these factories geographically dispersed in every single state across the country. And frankly, in many districts across the country, and most districts across the country, have something to do. That's why you have a very fragmented supply chain across the United States where goods are having to move. They may be assembled, procured in one part of the country, shipped down to, thousands of miles away to a different state, assembled there, and then gone to another part of the country to be for final assembly. And so you see this sort of movement of cargo around the country, which frankly, if you're in freight, you care about. So the two things that are driving flatbed is, one is AI data centers, the second is defense production. And those things are expected to continue to increase and increase next year. You also have infrastructure. And again, we have these research reports called SITREPs. I recommend you look at them. We dive into this stuff very deeply on these topics. But also, we have energy infrastructure that's being built out to support the AI data centers, the electrification, the transmission lines, the natural gas pipelines that you need to build data centers. Natural gas is the choice fuel for data centers today. All of that is being built out. There's a lot of government funding for it. And guess what? It moves by flatbed. So all of this is to say, while we have seen the flatbed market cool off slightly, and conditions are not as tight, there's no reason to be bearish on flatbed. And in fact, I would argue that if I were making investments in trucking, flatbed would be the industry that I look at as probably having the most upside, because it enjoys a lot of the reindustrialization, the reinvestment, the big capex that we're seeing right now in the freight economy.
All right, Craig, thanks for that update. And remember, as we talk about tender rejections, if you need capacity now, reach out to RXO. Thanks for their sponsorship for RXO Capacity Now.
They're there if your routing guides break and you need trucks and you don't know who to call, and your normal carriers, because that's what's happening. Carriers are dropping off. As carriers drop off, they've committed. They may not have trucks. You and I lived that world where at times we took advantage of the market, or our existing customers would surge. RXO is there as a hotline if you need it to really provide capacity right now, really when everything else is breaking.
I don't like to call it taking advantage of the market. I like to
Everyone takes advantage of the market. Look, that's the way you survive in trucking. You make your money when times allow you to make it. And no judgment. That's the way the game's played.
Yeah, a couple quick things on your sonar update. One, defense spending. So even if conflicts, don't continue to pop up as they, right, it's still replenishment, right? There will still be a massive amount of replenishment needed.
The president is at the NATO meeting today, and they're talking about increasing the spending. There's a report where each country has to demonstrate that they have what they've spent. They're committed. They're accountable to that. There's already been some big airplane orders that have been placed. You're going to hear a lot about that. It's going to be in the hundreds of billions of dollars. And next year, the defense budget, as I talked about this, is $1.5 trillion. It's a 50% increase. 80% of that is going into procurement of weapons. It's a lot of freight moving across the country. And look, credit to the military-industrial complex. That stuff is not a very efficient supply chain. They locate their production and assembly in different parts of the country to take advantage of votes from Congress. Just the way it works. No judgment here.
All right, one comment on flatbed. I know we're running behind, but I love that we're talking about flatbed normalizing and it's still a 25% tender rejection because it's not as crazy. Do you think some of that, when you talked about cooling because of seasonality and obviously construction season, but do you think some of it is because it was so insane at 50% that there was some mode shifting happening? Do you think some of that stuff moved to intermodal or other places?
The problem with flatbed is you can put some of those commodities into a dry van. But most of that, if it's moving by flatbed, will continue to move by flatbed. So I don't see a massive surge of flatbed trailers into the market. And so I think a lot of this is being dictated by early in the year, that construction season really drives a lot of that. And that's really, was the point of there was just more demand. And there was some military movement. We got enough anecdotes and channel checks that we know that some of the Defense Department was moving things around, and they need flatbed for that.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, we will talk about how Amazon is using its logistics network to get critical technology to disaster zones in hours, not weeks. It's National Safety Month, which makes this a great time to ask how your fleet can prevent more accidents. Samsara AI detects risks in real time, giving teams more visibility into what's happening on the road and more context to coach drivers before risky moments become incidents. Fleets using Samsara Complete AI Safety Solution have reduced crash rates by nearly 75%. See the data behind the results in the Samsara Safety Report at samsara.com/FreightWaves.
Race car drivers like NASCAR champion Jesse Love are a lot like commercial drivers, pros. But even the best in the world still watch the tape to see what they missed and get better next time. So we created the Samsara Driving Coach.
Great race, Jesse, but you were following too closely and you were speeding.
Okay, you got me on that one.
Samsara uses insights from millions of professional drivers to coach drivers in real time.
Because even champions need a coach.
Give me the keys.
The super successful people are part of the 1%. They're part of that very, very small percentage. That's why I don't want you to do things that everybody's doing. I want you to do the small things that nobody else is doing. The people that are most successful in this business treat it like it's the only thing that's bringing income into their household. If you do that, then you'll have the same results. These people operate like they have no other chance. They have nothing else going. This is the only breadwinner that they have in play. I'm Adam Wingfield, and this is the FreightWaves Playbook. Become part of the 1%. Sign up for FreightWaves Playbook today.
Welcome back to FreightWaves. Today, we're going to talk disaster relief, which is really one of the core tenets of supply chain and logistics, is making sure when things break, and I'm not just talking about supply chains break, but when things break, and I mean the world is chaotic, you have a weather event, you have a disaster, the logistics industry is at its best in those moments. And here to discuss that is Amazon's Senior Product Manager of Disaster Relief. And we have Amazon's Principal Technical Product Manager for Disaster Relief to talk specifically about this. Julie, you have worked in logistics. You worked on a lot of disaster relief. You know how important that is.
Yeah, we certainly hurricane relief, emergency relief, those sorts of things. And while I hated that the situations arose where they were required, it was pretty cool to do something that was really that like rewarding. So I'm excited to hear,
it actually
from these
felt
guys
like
about
kind of on the front lines of dealing, and really it's a life and death. We joke in the industry that oftentimes a freight is not a life and death thing, but this is a situation where there really is life and death. And Vidya, would like to bring you into the conversation. You run the disaster relief, you're the head of product. What exactly? And we also have Jeff Schweitzer here. He is the technical product manager for disaster relief. What exactly does this mean for Amazon?
Hi, Craig. Hi, Julie. Thanks for having us both on your show. So in simple terms, what Amazon does is we leverage all of our unique assets, whether that's logistics, technology, but also our people, in really making sure that we can have immediate, tangible impact to communities after they've faced a natural disaster. So what that means is that before a storm hits, we make sure that we have the right supplies already in the right place, so that after a storm comes through, we are there delivering aid to communities as soon as they need it and not when we're able to get it.
So what exactly, Amazon is such a big company with so many different business units. Is this tied into the logistics business, or is this broader than Amazon really using the retail operations and retail footprint or AWS? How does this really play into the overall Amazon business?
Yeah, at Amazon, we're really committed to using our scale and our abilities. And so when it's a company as big as Amazon, it's not just one part of Amazon that ends up responding after a disaster. So if I had to take an example of what just recently happened in Venezuela with the earthquakes there, the double earthquakes, we leveraged our technology that Jeff can speak to. We also leveraged our logistics line haul transport network. We also leveraged our Amazon Air network and actually flew a relief flight containing more than 600,000 relief items. And we were able to do all of that because we worked with our retail, trade, air, ground transport, and technology teams to coordinate all of that and get aid where it was needed.
So Jeff, can you tell us a little bit more about that and exactly what Amazon is doing in the ground in Venezuela right now?
In the moment, we're supporting our technology partners with technical capabilities to support communications, power, feeding back ground truth, what we call ground truth intelligence. So we have actionable insights into what really are the needs and where are they. And this helps us better gauge and align our efforts.
So really, I mean, looking at these photos that we've got here, we've had on screen, there was an earthquake in Venezuela. It looks absolutely devastating. It looks like a war zone, the rubble that you had. How impactful was this earthquake? How for those that may not be familiar with what exactly happened, how big of an earthquake was it and how much damage was done?
Look, from my perspective, in leading response operations, we've seen a lot of disasters around the world. This is clearly one of the most significant events that we've seen, especially at least in this part of the world. This is catastrophic. It's going to affect people's lives for many years to potentially decades.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a 7.2 and a 7.5 magnitude.
What was it? 7.5?
7.2 and 7.5. Yeah. There were two.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Visha, go ahead.
Point, Yeah, at this point, just to paint the picture of how devastating it's been, it's more than 2,000 people confirmed to have died, but something like 50, 60,000 people are still missing. And we're about 2 weeks out from when that happened. So it's really turned into a recovery operation now, and then helping survivors. And that's where the work that we do with partners, such as the Global Empowerment Mission, the Red Cross societies around the world, World Central Kitchen, Save the Children. We spend a lot of time talking to them during blue skies when there isn't a disaster, and learn from them in terms of what they need right after a disaster happened. What do survivors need to maintain dignity in the weeks and months that follow? And then based on those conversations, we pre-position product. And this is where we really tap into our retail network and this global access that we have to vendors to get the exact products that these experts in the disaster response field say is needed. We get those exact products, we get it in the volume that's needed, and we pre-position it, which means we keep it ready to go so that as soon as a disaster happens, we're not scrambling. The community isn't scrambling to get that aid there. We have it ready to go, and now we tap into our logistics network to get it there. And I often think about all of the trucks that we have on the road and the folks who listen to your show, because that's where we start. We start by placing truck orders, and we have carriers from across the country who accept those bids. Often they know that it's moving disaster supplies, and I'm amazed at how quickly they get it where it needs to go as well. So a huge thank you to drivers and to logistics operators around the country.
Yeah, the logistics industry steps up when you have these events. Go ahead, Jeff.
I'd like to second that too. I mean, if we just look at what we undertook over the last weekend, here it was, we're celebrating the 250th birthday of our country, and we had drivers on the road that were away from families, making sure that our products got into Miami so that these things could get out into planes and moving. So thank you.
I mean, it is an interesting thing when the industry gets to show its best, because this is really when we respond. And, we've seen disasters. They happen all the time, all over the world. And the reason that they're, I wouldn't say mitigated, but the reason that countries are able to move on and people are able to rebuild their lives is because of the strength of the logistics network. What made Amazon want to move into this disaster relief? How did you guys think about it and decide that this was something that sort of fits your mission?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you said about how natural disasters aren't isolated to one part of the world. They're global. They can happen at any point. And Amazon is a company that is at this point in over 70 countries. And we have an employee base of over 1 million people. So what that means is that when a disaster happens, we feel it because our customers feel it. So we feel that pain with them. We also feel it because our employees live and work in these areas. And so as an extension of our employees, the company feels it too. But at a much larger sense, the culture of Amazon is really set by what we call leadership principles, and there are 16 of them. And one of those principles is that success and scale bring broad responsibility. So there is this deep commitment across the company to utilizing that scale and really seeing how we can focus that scale on building long-term innovative programs that have a lasting positive impact. And so disaster relief was really clear that if you put technology, if you put logistics, and you put the retail expertise, all three of these together, that's where our sort of unique ability is. And our partners have said this to us. Again, all of these big response aid organizations, they've told us that even if they get cash, sometimes it's hard to figure out how to get products places, or sometimes it's hard to figure out who actually has this product. And so it's helpful then to have a company like Amazon that does this every day, and to leverage that relationship and to put that expertise to use in this way.
It's interesting. I spent some time, U.S. Express had participated in a lot of FEMA disaster relief projects. I won't say who it was, but one of the large logistics companies that you guys compete with at Amazon originally had that contract and decided that this was not something that they wanted to do. They run a very engineered network. The ad hoc nature, the disruptive nature of hurricanes, and we're talking in the United States, we're not talking around the world, was just something outside of the system that they wanted to run. You guys have the advantage of having a dynamic retail network, a sourcing network, which is very different than a typical logistics company, because logistics companies, even the best, can move freight. It gets there on time. They can manage these exceptions. But what you guys bring to the table is this robust and very substantial procurement network of procuring everything. You know who the suppliers are. I imagine that gives you so much pride to be able to tap into that for something like this.
Absolutely. And I think the example that you shared, we face that too, because it's such a decentralized model. When you have tens and twenties of items scattered across your network, in a disaster, you don't need tens and twenties, you need hundreds and thousands. And so that's why Amazon didn't just say, okay, oh, we can't do it. But instead, we decided to operate disaster relief hubs. So these are dedicated spaces within our fulfillment network, within our warehouses, where we actually store disaster relief supplies year round. So that's not just in the US, we operate this in 6 countries. And that's how we're able to move such high volume so quickly. It's because we're not reliant on just the dynamic retail network, but we've planned for it ahead of time.
How do these disaster relief requests come in to you all? How do you decide what to get involved in, and where do the requests come from?
So we spend a lot of time during Blue Sky. We've done this for about 8 years now. So over this 8-year period, we've established quite a bit of trust, and we've invested a lot in trust building with our response partners. So when a disaster happens, the partners immediately know to reach us and ask us for what it is that they need. And because we've done this for 8 years now, we've delivered over 200, we've responded to over 200 disasters and delivered over 26 million items. We now have a process in place that runs really well. So it means that even in a place like Venezuela, where we've never responded to a disaster before, and where, given all of the geopolitical considerations, where it's not a standard response, we were still able to be there quite quickly and respond in the manner that we did.
I love that Amazon's doing this. Having watched FEMA firsthand, no pun intended, disaster in a disaster, it was hard. It was very difficult to see government officials who are not typically dealing with logistics manage such a big disaster zone and trying to coordinate it. What I love about Amazon involved in this is that this is something you guys do every day. Logistics is the backbone of Amazon's business. And it is something that keeps your retail network and your whole business running. I think it's fantastic to see you guys stepping up in this capacity. It gives me a lot more confidence. And you talked about having these on-demand disaster warehouses. One of my observations was that there are certain states, Florida gets a grade A in terms of disaster preparedness. Places like Louisiana and even Virginia, I would give it a C and lower, because they weren't prepared. They didn't have the supplies. I think it's remarkable that you guys have these warehouses of supplies specifically built for disaster relief.
So, and speaking of that, as we enter late summer and season. Fall, what are you all doing to prepare for hurricane season?
Vijay, how are you guys handling hurricane season?
You talked about logistics, Craig, and I think right now we are a logistics company, but we're also a technology company. And so I'd love to share some examples of our rapid response systems that Jeff has been spearheading. So, Jeff?
Sure. To answer your question, one of the things that we're doing now is working down this pathway of enabling communities to better help themselves. One of the things, when you were referring to some of the things that you'd witnessed around FEMA and other response organizations and how you might grade them, I have a slightly different perspective of it because I've been in those disasters, I've seen it, lived it. And I know the Herculean efforts that the collective bodies have undergone to do good in the communities they're trying to serve. One of the things, though, that has been a continuing area for improvement that I have seen is enabling communities to better articulate what their actual needs are. Because in a disaster, the real first responder aren't the ones that are, behind red lights and racing to the scene. It's the people who are actually there. So the more we can empower communities to proactively identify what are my needs, what do I have that I can share with somebody else, and who can I work with to help connect those dots. This is where part of our technology strategy is helping us unlock potential pathways to doing this at scale. So for this year, as we're getting ready for as we have prepared for the hurricane season, we've built several hundred technology kits that enable power, connectivity, the things that answer the call of, what I've seen in disaster after disaster. The very first thing people want to do is communicate. They say, they come up to you and they're like, "Where's Wi-Fi? Do you have Wi-Fi?" Well, sure. And there's all kinds of reasons why you may want that. But, as we were working on this response with Venezuela, concurrently, we just had Super Typhoon Bobby just take a beeline right over the Mariana Islands. And with power and connectivity systems that we had just deployed there a couple of months ago in partnership with itdrc.org, we're already in position and in place. So community resiliency enablement strategy has already started to unfold. And I'd like to see that go larger.
Yeah, Jeff, and I had been on site to these disaster sites. In fairness, it was 2003. So it's right at the moment when when FEMA started to use private contractors. So a little unprepared in those days. And you, as you mentioned, the communications networks, the terrestrial networks were all knocked out. Cellular communications did not exist. Power was not around. It was something that, having been to multiple sites in multiple states, some were just better prepared than others. But maybe it's not fair to give them a grade because these are oftentimes unconventional projects that they have to get involved in.
And I think it's also nuanced with the types of disasters that we continually face. We're under a rapid fire onslaught of disasters that are hitting our nation and hitting other countries. You can't just be prepared for everything, but having versatility in your toolkit where you can address the basics, that goes a long way.
Yeah, I think it's great to see you guys leveraging your technology, your infrastructure, all the resources.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see you guys doing this kind of work, and that
I'm glad
the resources
to know
you have available are doing.
And we're going to talk to Michelle Livingston here shortly. She ran Home Depot's. Have you been on to the war? Did you go down to the war room at Home Depot? I did. I got the opportunity to do that, see that firsthand. I mean, it's interesting to see private enterprise step up, like Amazon and others, to really respond to these disasters, because frankly, that's what makes America great. It's the combination of private enterprise, capitalism, working to do something good for society at large.
Yeah. Thank you guys both
Thank you
so much
for coming in.
Yes. We'll be right back with an oil update from John Kingston.
Every load you move depends on one thing, knowing who's on the other side. And Highway gives freight brokers the carrier identity tools to verify carriers, secure the load, and book with confidence. The performance guarantee puts up $100,000 behind that promise. Real money behind the standard. No other freight technology company has made that commitment. This is, again, Highway, the standard for carrier identity.
Race car drivers like NASCAR champion Jesse Love are a lot like commercial drivers, pros. But even the best in the world still watch the tape to see what they missed and get better next time. So we created the Samsara driving coach.
Great race, Jesse, but you were following too closely and you were speeding.
Okay, you got me on that one.
Samsara uses insights from millions of professional drivers to coach drivers in real time.
Because even champions need a coach.
Give me the keys.
What's the masterclass all about? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a driver, you're an owner-operator, you're a fleet owner, whether you're in compliance services, dispatcher, no matter what it is, masterclass is for you. Every 2 weeks, you're going to sit down with me, and we're going to go over certain business topics that are related specifically to your small trucking company operations. We're going to help you with everything from compliance to how to negotiate better on the spot board, how to find direct freight, and everything in between. This is the reason why you don't want to miss out on masterclass. It's about an hour to an hour and a half, and then on top of that, you'll have the library to you so that way you can always research and reflect back onto it. Don't miss out this opportunity. This is built specifically for you. I'm excited, and I hope to see you in class.
Imagine a world where your freight moves as fast as a digital pulse. What if your visibility didn't just tell you where a truck was, but exactly where it needed to be 48 hours from now? Think of a logistics network that corrects its own mistakes before they cost you a single dime. What if your supply chain could think for itself? Imagine AI agents negotiating rates in milliseconds, predictive models that solve labor shortages before they even happen. This isn't science fiction, it's the agenda. On July 15th at the historic Old Post Office in Chicago, FreightWaves presents the Supply Chain AI Symposium. We are defining in real time how AI is embedded into every mile, every warehouse, and every handshake. Because in 2026, the future isn't just coming, it's already negotiating. The FreightWaves Supply Chain AI Symposium. Secure your spot now.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Today. We've got a great second hour, Julie.
We do. We've got John Kingston talk about the morning's oil numbers. We've got Michelle Livingstone going through her 30 plus years in supply chain and giving us her opinion on a few things. I'm really excited about that. And it's going to be great.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, it's that time of the week. It is Tuesday. It is the Department of Energy EIA's weekly petroleum stats. But really what I think is most relevant for this audience is the DOE index that's used to set fuel surcharges. John Kingston, there's been some chaos in the Middle East. Not that that's a new statement for someone who's been covering oil for almost his whole life. John, tell us about what's happening.
Well, the way the market is reacting is insane. First of all, let's get to the numbers. The DOE EIA number was $4.57.8. That's down 9 cents for the week. It's down 12 out of the last 13 weeks. It still is a full $1 above where it was. It's about $1 where it was before the war started. So I do think that needs to be noted. But what's going on right now is really unprecedented. Nobody can really reach back to their old data for the last time this happened. The crack spread, which is essentially the difference between the value of a product or a basket of products and the price of crude, has blown out to levels never seen before. The indicator that I like the best is to take they call the 3-2-1 crack spread, where you take the price of a barrel of crude, whether it's Brent or WTI, you multiply that by 3. You take the price of a gallon of gasoline, multiply that by 42 to get a barrel number. Add to that the price of a barrel of diesel. These are numbers off the CME NYMEX. You subtract them, and that's essentially your crack spread. And right now, the crack spread is about 70 to 75% of the price of the barrel of Brent. At the start of the year, it was 27%. And right before the war started, it was somewhere between 40 and 45%. So this is absolutely unprecedented. And, the famous dictum, I think his name was Alan Stein, Ben Stein's father, if something can't go on forever, it won't. And there's no way that this kind of crack spread can continue. But where this is really becoming relevant is the battle of the bulls and the bears over where the market is going. The bulls are pointing to the crack spread as a sign that the market really is a lot stronger than these really big drops in the price of crude would indicate. Their argument here is, and I think I said this last week, crude is a worthless commodity. It has one value, and that's really to make products from it, and that the strength in products is really where it's at, and that will eventually sort of overcome. And really what you're paying on the at the pump is not going to be related to the price of crude. It's going to be related to the price of products, and that has not fallen anywhere near the decline in the price of crude.
So John, when I look at the wholesale, and you can find this in Sonar, we have this wholesale rack price, which is ULSD. That price is down to $3.38. It had peaked at $4.75 a gallon. So we're down $1.40 from sort of peak to trough. We're down 90 cents in retail prices. DTS.USA was sort of the peak to trough where we're at right now. We haven't seen, I mean, the spread on this is actually as wide as it was during sort of the peak of fuel. If you can see this on the chart, if you go back a couple of years ago, right after, COVID, and we had a lot of sort of weird anomalies happen in that sort of post-COVID environment back in 22, 23, it's as wide as it is there. It is coming down, but wholesale prices have absolutely collapsed compared to retail. Why is that? What is happening that's keeping retail diesel prices higher than what wholesale would reflect should be priced into the market?
I think a lot of it has to do with speed. The speed of the collapse is really rapid right now in the wholesale prices. And retailers these are localized decisions for the most part. A lot of times they're made by a manager of a small group of stations, even if it's in a chain. And first of all, they're going to want to try to keep the price up as long as they can. And as long as they can is essentially defined by when the guy one block over moves his price in an effort to grab market share. But they're not really of the mindset to move prices really fast, where wholesale has to. We could do a whole show on that, but wholesale prices really do have to react to futures market and spot market gyrations quickly. Retail doesn't. So the fact that the wholesale market is falling this quickly, of course, to my earlier point, it's not falling as fast as crude.
But John, in fairness, they react really quickly when the price goes up. Like
they do that.
You can't argue that they don't respond quickly, because clearly when you look at the data, when it's going up, they respond immediately. It's the way down that they're slow to respond, which is just, it helps them gain some margin on the way down. I don't think there's any dispute unless I'm missing something.
No, I don't dispute that. I would disagree with you. I mean, I would say that the rate of change is slower on the way down, but that the rate of change on the way up is often not quite the rapid increase in the wholesale level either. I think, these companies are not set up to make money on gasoline. Let's face it, they're set up to make money in the convenience store, and so at times they're just not the best setters of price because they're totally price takers. Right now, they'll hold out as long as they can at the higher levels. But, down the line, if the price of diesel continues to come down, somebody's going to look to grab some market share, and then they're going to have to react.
So it's all convenience stores and other services. Maintenance is one of those, and parking has become an emerging source of income for the truck stops. I think it's important to note. So, John, tell us about the Middle East. I mean, we had Hormuz, we've got some resolution, but it feels like it reminds me, and I think we talked about this last time, of Gulf War I, where we sort of contained Saddam Hussein, but he really was not, he's still in power. And occasionally would fly a jet and sort of test the Allies' response to the no-fly zone. From where I sit, it feels a lot like that. Is this going to be an ongoing problem that the United States and, I would say the U.S. and its ally, Israel, maybe the Middle Eastern allies, they have to contain? Is that what we're going to see?
Oh, I think so. I mean, to me, with the leverage that Saddam Hussein had after the first Gulf War was almost kind of non-existent compared to the Iranians have learned that they can control, if not totally control, they can certainly influence the Strait of Hormuz. Strategically, the bottom line is this. The Strait of Hormuz was not an issue before the war. It was always the possibility that something could happen, but it had been a possibility that something could happen for like 40 years, right? 45, 50 years, and nothing ever did. Now it did. And once the Iranians have that knowledge that they can kind of make life difficult, there's a Citicorp analysis out, a very bearish look into crude prices next year, and they said the political premium is gone, and I just can't believe that. I think once that strait has been closed once, even if for a several month period, or even if not totally shut, certainly of a lengthy duration and certainly affected, I just don't think that goes out of the price completely.
I mean, look, we were at $68 over the weekend for WTI. I think we're up to 72 when I looked at it this morning. So we have seen a jump a little bit. That was related to some of the military events last night, where it appeared that the Iranians were shooting off missiles to civilian cargo ships. What is your read on that situation?
I just want to point out one thing. You talked about $60, $70 oil. That's crude. If you take the price of ultra low sulfur diesel on the CME right now and multiply it by 42, you're looking at a per barrel price for diesel of about $135. So the crude price, again, is, I'm not saying it's not important. Of course it's important. But I think you really kind of got to take that diesel price and multiply it out. So the other question was, what's militarily going to happen? I don't know if I really want to go there. I don't consider myself an expert on that. I just think it's a brave new world. The Strait of Hormuz, which was never going to shut, and if it did, the U.S. Navy would go in there and blast it open, shut, and the Navy didn't blast it open. That's you can't go back. It's like John, the Wizard of Oz. You can't go back, right?
John, it's funny. I got asked to be on a national TV network, and they started asking me military questions. My God, I don't know why you're asking me military questions. So,
I'm in the Air Force right now, so yeah.
Look, I think it's interesting. You point out that diesel, if you sort of added up the total number of barrels or gallons of diesel that are in the barrel, you pointed out it should be $135. Why have we not seen that? Why has diesel is it just refinery capacity that's driving the market right now?
Well, it's a couple of things. First of all, the Ukrainian strikes on the Russian refining industry, the Russian refining sector, have had a significant impact. Remember when the Russia-Ukraine war started, the first price that really reacted the most was diesel, because the Russians are A, big suppliers of diesel, and B, big suppliers of Urals crude, which is very diesel rich. So that's a factor too. And yes, you have shutdowns in the Middle East of refining capacity there. Everybody else is running full out, and you continue to draw down inventories. Maybe that's slowed a little bit, but you've really drawn down stocks. And the bullish case is that you're going to have to refill those inventories. That they're, in a lot of cases, they're operating at just kind of minimal level, where the number is the minimal level for the system to operate. You can't go down to zero. You always have to have some in inventories, and that has to be refilled. And so you're going to have a demand pull there. Right now, you would think that you would have more of a demand pull from the refiners who want to run full out, given how profitable it is to run these days. But they're already running full out. They can't put any more crude in. This is one of the reasons why you have this gigantic spread, and why you as I said before, something's got to give. Either products are going to have to come down closer to the price of crude, or crude's going to have to come up close to the price of products. And as I've mentioned before on prior Tuesdays, right now I'm in the latter camp.
So, John, I got to ask, yesterday we had the president of Pilot's energy business talk about the SEED Act. Any thoughts about this moving through Congress? What's the prognosis for the SEED Act? For the viewers that aren't familiar with it, it is basically a $1 tax refund. It's basically a $1 per gallon tax refund for fuel diesel that has bio blended in it, biodiesel. So it is going through Congress, but it's still very early. What's your read and prognosis of this passing?
Well, there's already significant breaks for remember, there's biodiesel and there's renewable diesel. They are different. Biodiesel is really a blend stock. You find out a lot of that in heating oil. You can't just put it into a tank. Renewable diesel you can put into a tank. There's already a significant amount of credits. There's also the California Low Carbon Fuel Standard credit, which is one of the reasons why the vast majority of renewable diesel in this country is consumed in California. I don't know if there's really you're talking about the farm lobby here, that there's a more taste for this, but I'm really not sure why we need another credit, because there's already quite a few of them.
We should have had John on yesterday to interview the gentleman from Pilot. Was very bullish on the SEED Act. It was really. I asked him, I was like,
a place like I used to go to the excuse me, the annual meeting of the Society of Independent Gasoline Marketers of America, Sigma. Pilot was probably, in fact, Pilot was there because I knew somebody at Pilot at the time. And all they cared about was supply. Like the price, actually, they didn't like a price too high, because if the price was high, then they'd have less money to spend in the convenience store. But all they cared about was supply. So somebody like Pilot is going to look at something like that as an incentive to make more product, and then it's a good thing. It really,
but it lowers the, I mean, to your point, it lowers the price of, these incentives do lower the price to the consumer and ultimately to our audience, which are the trucking companies and the shippers that are paying fuel surcharges. Why shouldn't our industry
ensuring the supply that, like John,
ensuring supply, but as you're making the case again, you can argue whether we should have more or less tax, which is a totally different. This is not the show for that, John. We want less taxes, more money in our pockets. That's what our industry really wants. Why would you not support this?
Well, why would you not support it? I mean, if you think that it's a giveaway to the agriculture sector or something like that, or a giveaway to the oil industry, that kind of argument, it would really become an ideological argument. It would really be an argument that, if you believe in free markets, you shouldn't go putting your finger on the scale either way. I mean, that would be the argument against this. I also think that you could probably make a case. You could probably look at it and say, this is really going to go more into the hands of Pilot, and really questionable how much it's going to get into the pockets of consumers. That would be another argument.
Well, again, there's plenty of networks where that argument can be argued. We're talking about freight, and we're talking about improving the cash flows of our audience, and ultimately lower prices and
potentially lowering costs for farmers that can then
or creating incentives, because it's soy
margin for farmers.
It's seaborne.
The other argument is, anytime you talk about renewables, you're always talking about the food versus fuel argument. Do we really want to take more soybeans, which most Americans don't eat soybeans per se, but they eat them indirectly because that feeds pigs and cows, which becomes pork and beef. Do you really want to divert more of your food supply into making fuel as opposed to away from it as food? So food versus fuel has always been a debate when it comes to the whole issue of renewable fuels. If you're going to expand some kind of credit and incentivize more soybeans to go into the production of renewable diesel, you're back into that argument again.
But isn't the counter argument that China was buying most of the soybeans from the United States? Most of the soy was for exports. It wasn't for domestic consumption. And with this trade tension that we've had over the last couple of years, that really, China, I think earlier this year was not buying any soybeans, and that they've resumed buying some soybeans recently due to a concession that, they gave Donald Trump after he met with Xi. It feels like it really isn't going to divert a lot of, even if we had a very productive biodiesel and a big supply. I don't understand the argument about how that takes away from American food.
Well, I guess you'd have to do the numbers here. What did the Chinese import in the past, and is there a market? Is there enough renewable diesel capacity to take the lost Chinese sales and put them into making renewable diesel? And if it's a kind of a questionable thing, like the Chinese one year don't buy any soybeans because they're mad at us, and then the next year they buy a lot, is what's going to be the capital investment decision process to build more renewable diesel capacity? So these things all kind of go together, and they kind of get tricky. At a certain point, if you just shove down the price of the renewable diesel feedstock without adding more capacity to turn soybeans into renewable diesel, you really haven't gotten anything except put more money in the hands of those entities that do, in fact, have a renewable diesel capacity.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that beef tallow is also, and look, beef tallow became
beef tallow
RFK
is the
has
thing.
made it so famous.
Not only do we want our fries in it, we want it on our face. So
you want it on your face?
Well,
people use beef tallow instead of moisterizers now. It's natural.
I did not know this.
It's
is it better for you than the chemicals?
I will tell you, I used it for a while, and one night I went and I didn't care for the smell, but I thought, maybe it's just me because it's on my face. And my son goes, "Mom, you smell like steak." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm done." So
probably not great as a perfume, but there's a lot.
But it does feel amazing. Yeah, it's good for you.
These TikTok, natural things. I don't know. I mean, look, I never thought about beef tallow until literally like a year ago when RFK
everyone wants
made it
their
a
fries
thing.
in it too. Yeah.
And now these companies are bragging they have beef tallow.
Okay, so it's been really cool to hear this opposite perspective sort of today as opposed to yesterday.
We should have had John over here to debate it because this is your world, John. But it is interesting, and like I'm all for less taxes on anything. I think that's frankly, and I guess we have to at some point pay for this stuff, right?
Someone has to.
That's the counter argument.
Then the argument comes, how deeply do you want the government involved in the market, even if it's a tax cut?
Yeah, like I said, this is a different show. We talk about freight and we talk about improving the cash flows of our
business. So I want to go back to that, and I want to break it down a little bit, John. For those of us whose brains do not move as quickly as yours, I read the article this morning where you really dig into this crack spread, and I had to sort of do the math for myself and create a visual. So break it down. It's really that crude has dropped 7% since June, while diesel has actually risen 4%, and that's why this spread is so drastically different than what it was earlier in this year.
Okay.
Is that accurate?
That spread is drastically different than it was in history. I mean, if there was ever a crack spread, again, if I measure it as the size of the crack spread as a percent of crude, which is the way I did it, I doubt there's ever been one this high. This is insane. This is kind of like, it's like the freight market coming out of COVID, right? Right, Craig? Did you ever see such nuttiness? Okay, that's because it was a once in a lifetime shock to the system, and the recovery of it sent the freight market into spasms of joy in some cases. I mean, we are dealing with an enormous shock to the system, really bigger than the first Gulf War. So this is one of the ways it's reacting. It's reacting with this nutty crack spread, which will eventually get back to normal. But to my point, how is it going to get back to normal? Or is products going to drop toward crude or the other way around?
But John,
I could almost hear the exasperation in your voice this morning when I was reading the article.
He's very intense. But John, is this a refinery? I mean, it's still not clear to me what's driving this, and I don't know that our audience understands it. Is it refinery capacity? Is it markup? What's causing it?
Well, there's several things. As I said, let's not forget the Russian loss here, okay? That they were an exporter. They're not exporting anymore. Maybe you saw some of those videos of people getting in fights on gas lines. Look, I was on gas lines in the 70s. I doubt I ever waited more than 2 hours. They're talking about 12-hour wait for gasoline in Russia. It's just crazy. So they're no longer a supply source. The Chinese aren't exporting. They're hanging on to everything they can. U.S. refineries are pumping out as much as they can, but you've got Middle East refineries that are down, or they can't get even if they're operating, they can't get their supply out to the market. So that's just tightening all this up. It does seem that with whatever opening of the Strait of Hormuz has occurred so far, a lot of what is getting at is crude. So people are talking about this crude glut because you've had this all backed out, and now the Iranians are able to export because we took the sanctions off. So now there's Iranian supply that wasn't there previously. So you have this situation of a pretty good supply of crude and not a pretty good supply of products, and you see the result in the crack spread.
One thing I did this morning, they were talking about it on one of the business networks, is the fact that jet fuel prices are coming down because of there's more supply than there was that risk of running out in certain countries. And I think even certain airports ran out. But there's been some relief there, but the airlines are not reducing their price. They're keeping the high tickets, and that's more margin for them. And they're finding that consumers are still buying tickets at the higher price levels.
Same with freight spot rates.
I mean, look, we've said this before, is that I think every company, every industry looks for an excuse or a catalyst, if you will, to raise rate. We saw it in trucking. But it's hard, but they become disintermediated. It's hard to reverse that once you found a new price level, as we're seeing in trucking, as you point out.
Yeah, it's always and it doesn't matter what kind of company. I always get a laugh if I'm reading a story, not just now, over the years. You read a story about a company that would say, well, we suffered this quarter from higher oil prices or higher fuel prices. And I thought to myself, they weren't higher this quarter. It's like
it's the same thing with the weather, John. Every
We did
public.
crap, so we did lousy, so we'll just blame the fuel price.
Well, they do the same thing with weather in trucking. It's like every winter, trucking companies come out and say the weather impacted us.
Earnings and service is all service failures.
Service failure is always weather.
Weather, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's always weather. That's why we have to deadhead and charge you. We're deadheading trucks. It's $1,000 increase. I remember I played that game.
John, it's been great. Can't wait to talk to you next
love
week.
you. Have a good week.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Michelle Livingstone.
Race car drivers like NASCAR champion Jesse Love are a lot like commercial drivers, pros. But even the best in the world still watch the tape to see what they missed and get better next time. So we created the Samsara driving coach.
Great race, Jesse, but you were following too closely and you were speeding.
Okay, you got me on that one.
Samsara uses insights from millions of professional drivers to coach drivers in real time.
Because even champions need a coach.
Give me the keys.
The super successful people are part of the 1%. They're part of that very, very small percentage. That's why I don't want you to do things that everybody's doing. I want you to do the small things that nobody else is doing. The people that are most successful in this business treat it like it's the only thing that's bringing income into their household. If you do that, then you'll have the same results. These people operate like they have no other chance. They have nothing else going. This is the only breadwinner that they have in play. I'm Adam Wingfield, and this is the FreightWaves Playbook. Become part of the 1%. Sign up for FreightWaves Playbook today.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Today. It has been a great show, but our next guest is the perfect guest to talk about a lot of issues, career growth, bringing people into the industry, women empowerment in the industry, as well as, I got to start this conversation. We had the group from Amazon in their disaster relief. Michelle, we know this is hurricane season. You've seen plenty of hurricane rooms. Tell us a little bit about how important it is for the logistics industry to step up in these times. And look, in my opinion, this is when we're at our best.
Oh, absolutely. It's good to see you both. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And I spent many hours in the Home Depot Hurricane Command Center over the years, and it really is an opportunity for the industry to shine. We really partner with good carriers and drivers who understand the need to be there for our customers, and they've really gone above and beyond. And although it's been 5 years since I've been in a Home Depot Command Center, I know that it's still going strong and will do so going forward. And I applaud everyone because it's truly a partnership and it takes a village to get those things done.
Well, I know it's like last time I was in a hurricane room was 2005. So I know it's evolved a lot since then. Just the technology's evolved, the communication networks have evolved, the ability to have satellites. What is the biggest difference between 20 years ago and today in terms of hurricane logistics and hurricane preparedness?
I think the visibility has improved, and that's probably been the best. When you've got a load of generators that are appearing. Everyone wants to know exactly where they are, when are they going to arrive, so they can communicate that to the customers. And so I think the visibility has been probably the greatest improvement over the years.
It's so cool when we get the opportunity to use our career experience to do things that feel like they really matter. And so I definitely want to come back to that and talk about some of the amazing things you are doing in your, I guess, sort of semi-retirement. But before we get there, can you just walk us through your career and your experience of it? I would love to feature a bit of what you've accomplished. Early in my career, I was in a vendor summit maybe or something, and I remember just being so impressed and thrilled to see you in such a high leadership level in supply chain. And that was great for me. So I would love for you to share a bit of that story.
Oh, thank you, Julie. I hope I remember it all. I've been in the industry, as I like to say, for 150 years. So I was fortunate to have graduated from Indiana University with a degree in business and a concentration in transportation. And I don't know if y'all know this, but Indiana University was the national championship football team this year, just in case you missed it. But from there, it really set up well for my career, because I went right into transportation and had a chance to work for some great companies. And truly, it is in my DNA. I have loved it from the beginning. My dad was in transportation. As I always say, he kept me very humbled. He worked for a number of motor carriers as I was growing up, and he always made sure that we treated all the carriers with respect and that we recognized and appreciated all the hard work that drivers do. And it was really great. Now, he did give me the one piece of advice to be the shipper, to stay on the shipper side, because it's always more fun to be the customer. I don't know if that's entirely true all the time, but it certainly boded well for me. And I'm very lucky to have had the career that I did and enjoyed each and every day and literally skipped to work every day, because it is just so much fun. So I hope to encourage and inspire more folks to enter the industry, because I think it's truly a great one and it continues to improve and evolve all the time.
Seems to be a common theme that it's sort of in our DNA. We get it from our parents who are also in the industry. I hear that so often. I mean, obviously it's true of both of us as well. But speaking of new entrants into the industry and continuing to support that, you co-founded Wise Beyond. Can you talk a little bit about that and sort of what need you saw there that fills?
Yes, we're really excited about Wise Beyond. It's still growing and evolving too, but I had been part of Awesome, which was led by Ann Drake, and we had the benefit of all of her great network and intel. And Awesome stands for Achieving Women's Excellence in Supply Chain Operations Management and Education. Awesome. And it is really focused more on the senior level. And in my mind, we can't get women to the senior level if we can't get them in the door. So Wise Beyond is intended to fill the void from the university days to the time that you're a senior manager or a director in your company, and really provide that career advice, the intelligence, and the opportunity to network with others and to continue to focus on real-time issues and how you solve big problems. So it's been a terrific experience, and I really credit Stephanie Thomas, who is a professor at the University of Arkansas, who started Wise Connections, and really building on her success and taking what we've learned from Awesome. It's been terrific. So Stephanie Thomas, Natalie Putnam, who was also a co-founder, and I are still working on getting through some of the startup issues, but I think we're connecting with a much needed audience. And although our focus is to continue to help young women, it's open to everyone, of course.
I mean, it feels like Arkansas would be the right place for that. You have two CEOs of two very large public trucking companies that are based in Arkansas, which I think is pretty remarkable. You know, Shelley, who's a friend of the show, we had Shelley on our inaugural episode, Shelley Simpson, JB Hunt, and ArcBest also has a woman CEO, which is for trucking companies is actually quite rare. Michelle, why is that? I mean, is there a reason? I mean, as a female, Julie, what's your perspective? I'd love to hear it as someone who has risen in this industry. Why is the reason that women are not choosing or don't have as much opportunities as perhaps men do, or is that changing?
I would like to say that it has changed, obviously, but it hasn't changed quickly enough. And Julie, I'd love your perspective too, because I know you've been in the industry as well. we need to make this an industry that people feel respected and can feel like they can grow. Transportation in particular is difficult. It's 24/7, and that's just life in the big city. And it's not for everyone, but we need to ensure that it does provide opportunities and that we are helping women to grow and develop. And it really will bode well for the industry when we have that mix of diversity. What's your thought, Julie?
Yeah, so I mean, I never felt like being a woman in our industry was in any way a negative for me, but I think it was also part of it was my environment where it was never an issue, right? But there are absolutely conversations that are had about you when you're not in the room as a woman that would not be had about a man. And I also think that you just didn't see it. I was always the only female in a room once I was at, a director level or higher, aside from maybe safety or HR. Certainly when it came to true operations, as you mentioned, Michelle, that are, 24/7, higher demand from a emotional and chaos standpoint, I guess, where there were just fewer and fewer women, and I just didn't see it. And so then sometimes that is tricky, right? Navigating like dinners that you're the only woman there, or like one-on-one dinners with a male colleague, or navigating travel when you're always the only woman. And I think I just was owned that, like, yeah, I'm a woman and I might have to go to the bathroom more often, or I might have to do whatever, but never made it a differentiator, right? Like I was always just very important to me to just sort of be known for my work product versus anything else.
Is there something in common? I mean, you both, listened to Michelle's story about the fact that she is a trucking brat. Her father was in the industry. You are a trucking brat as well. Is that one of the reasons that your career, because you actually have this tribal knowledge that is embedded in you, which I wonder if has driven some of your career. It feels like that is an interesting sort of element, because this, one time I was told by a female who I was trying to get to come into the industry, told me that this didn't feel like an industry for her. It's an industry that has a lot of nuances to it. It's a pretty rugged industry. And her comment was, this doesn't feel like a place for a female. I don't know, Michelle, what your thoughts are there. And maybe that's not, I'm a dude, so I don't know if that's fair to say, but.
It's okay to be a dude. But I do think that there is a real opportunity for particularly the women that have made it to continue to use our voices and make this an environment that others do find attractive. And I think, as I think about my own career journey, there were times that I could have and should have used my voice more. I always seem to take the high road. It's like, oh no, I'm fine with that. Someone said an inappropriate comment. That's just so-and-so. They didn't really mean it. I've worked with them for lots of years. But now I really feel like it is part of our responsibility to make sure that we help others who may not realize the impact that words have or their actions have, so that others that are debating whether or not this is a good industry for them will realize that actually it's okay. And you'll be okay. You can make an impact and this is fine. But as women already in the industry, we need to use our voices to make sure that we are helping others ensure that this is a good environment and industry to be in.
Yeah, I will have told you that when I first started out and I was interning, I would have told you this was not the industry for me. Like everything about it was, I hated all of it, right?
Why did you hate all of it?
Well, I was 19, so I hated that I was working full time, first of all, but second of all, on summer break. But I think it was just gruff, and I hadn't been exposed to that level of when you're calling and making a delivery appointment, they're mean to you. When drivers call in, most of the time when they call in is because they have a problem. And I didn't,
frustrated.
Well, and I didn't have any of the expertise to deal with it. So I think that that's what changed as I got later in my career. I had the confidence to deal with those issues where I did feel more comfortable in those rooms. And you mentioned growing up around it. I do think it gives you chops sooner because you've had those conversations around your dinner table and done it. But I want to switch gears a little bit, Michelle, and I would love to get your take on the market and the capacity exiting the market, and what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, this was a long cycle in the transportation world. Even as a long, diehard shipper, it felt like it had lasted too long and needed to evolve. And it's, I think, a good thing for carriers to now finding their way back into the marketplace and pricing adjusting. And although the capacity exits were not as planned maybe for some as it was for others, I think it is giving carriers who are very committed to the industry to an opportunity to grow and shine and hopefully regain some of the traction that they had lost over the last 4 years. So I think that it's going to continue to grow. Who knows how long this next cycle will last, but I think it's a good wake-up call for shippers and for carriers on how to deal with the transition when the cycles don't behave as they have in the past.
One thing we've talked about, Michelle, I'd love to get your take on it, is in talking about talent, is there's been a lot of turnover in the shipping departments, logistics departments, a lot of promotion where we've had folks retire out, leave the industry, younger folks have entered the business, but they may have not seen an environment where carriers have the advantage. We've talked to shippers that when we're interacting inside of our Sonar relationships, where they're not even sure what a carrier market looks like where carriers have leverage. You've seen all sorts of cycles. What is the environment like from your observation? Is that a real phenomenon where there just isn't the depth of experience to see a market like this?
So long, yeah.
It has, it's gone on. You could argue COVID gave carriers, but I think everyone was aware of the weirdness of COVID. I'd love to get your take on that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are a whole host of people who have not gone through enough cycles yet to realize how that works. And they may not have the strategies in place to make sure that they're covered. And they will certainly recognize after this cycle that you have to have a strategy that works in both cycles. And you have to be very cognizant of the fact that how carriers perceive you and your business matters. And, I'm a long advocate for being a shipper of choice. And for me, that is that's the North Star, that you want to be a company that people want to do business with in good times and bad. Yes, you always have to tweak your strategy somewhat as the environment changes, but you don't have to go ditch to ditch. And how you choose to play this out and the relationships that you have and how you treat your carriers matters. So I am a big advocate of that.
What does shipper of choice mean? That's a term. We have an award where we recognize companies that have one shipper of choice voted on by carriers, get the opportunity to speak about that topic. But what does it mean for someone like yourself? What are the guidelines that you think drive a shipper of choice?
I think it's really more of